Hashem Svasai Titzach Uviagi Tilasacha. We're now in the 12th and second to last parak of Nechemiah. This parak has two parts. The first part is another listing. Here we're going to list all the Kohanim and the Leviim that came up with Zerubbabel, and we're going to list, and that there are some ideas about them, and then subsequently they're going to do a Chanukas, the wall. They're going to consecrate the walls as something that is very special, and there's a whole procession that is going to be done. Now the procession that's going to be done is going to be done in accordance with the halachos of the procession, similar to the procession that was done many years before, during the time of the first Beis HaMikdash. However, it is not going to have a king. It is not going to have the Urim and Tumim. There are going to be obvious differences. And so we have to understand together what in the world is going on. Why do we need this consecration? This whole idea of why do we need the listing and why do we need a clear delineation of this consecration is really an important piece that we're going to have to uncover together in this parak. So first, the Kohanim and Leviim that went up, and we list all of them, a lot of them, and especially the Roshei HaKohanim, the heads of the Kohanim families during the time of Yeshua, which we know was the Kohen Gadol, and then the Leviim as well. So when it came to the one of the things that are mentioned is that there was this guy at the end of Pasuk Ches. So first of all, it lists all the leaders of the Kohanim, then it lists the leaders of the Leviim. And when it talks about the leaders of the Leviim, one of the leaders was Yedos, and him and his brothers. Who was he? Well, Yedos was in charge of from the word lahodos. He was in charge to give thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he would play certain musical instruments that were the thankful instruments. Him and his brothers, and right before him is Matanya. We know he was the guy who had that beautiful voice, and he was the one who sang. So we have the singers, we have the special musical instrument accompaniment, and this is their job. And then in Pasuk Yud, it goes through Yeshua Holidith Yehoyakim Holidith Eliashiv, etc., until we get to the Yonatan Holid Es Yadua. And who are these people? These are the Kohanim Gedolim. These are the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol. Now, there are 6 generations of Kohen Gadol, and we know that Yadua, he is interesting because he is a relative of Shimon HaTzadik. Who is Shimon HaTzadik? So right now we're dealing with Persia, but shortly thereafter, either his son or his grandson is going to be Shimon HaTzadik, and he appeared to Alexander the Great. So now we're talking about the Greeks. And Alexander the Great in a dream, and any time that Alexander the Great was victorious, he would have this picture in his head or in a dream of Shimon HaTzadik. And then one day he actually met Shimon HaTzadik. He bowed down. He gave a lot of respect to him, and so that story is shortly thereafter. So the Malbim has questioned how it could have been that we have 6 Kohen Gadols from the time of Persia all the way to the time of the Greeks. It doesn't seem to make sense, but he doesn't rectify the situation. But in any event, those are the Kohanim Gedolim. And then we speak about that the heads of each of the families of the Kohanim, and it mentions them. But when it comes to the Roshei Avos, the Kohanim, that's what's mentioned. But for the Leviim, well, that's written in Sefer Divrei Hayamim, which is kind of interesting. It's not our Divrei Yamim, but it's written in some sort of chronicle because there's a lot that would be written, and so somehow they're not given as much credit. Perhaps we know that the Leviim were a lot less represented, and they came way later into the story, so they don't get the cutoff. I'm not really sure, but in any event, we have this idea: lahalel, lahodos, mitzvahs David, ish Elokim, mishmar leumas mishmar. So what is going to happen now is that we're going to, that these Kohanim, these Leviim, they're going to be singing lahodos, lahalel, lahodos, b'mitzvahs David. So what does that mean? They're going to be praising according to the Tehillim. Now that's actually interesting because the Minchas Chinuch says that Before, they were just praised, like the Torah doesn't say what they're supposed to be praising, so they would just be praising based on the Torah. They would just be singing. It is the D'Rabbanan, because again, we're moving into that direction. Remember, Ezra and the Anshe Knesset Agdola, they're not leaving anything up to chance. And so now there's going to be a shift. And the shift is going to be Kimitzvas David, which is now they're being told exactly what it is that they are supposed to be saying, and nothing anymore is left up to chance. In any event, now they're going to. We are going to shift in Pasuk Chav Zayin to, so that's the listing, and as we have mentioned, the listing is important. It's important to Ezra. It's important to Nechemiah. It's important because these are the people that were Moser Nefesh, and you must remember them. You have to remember that these were the people that worked hard, that did their work, and we don't take that for granted. So we want to recognize them, and we want to remember them. But 52 days later, with the completion of the Chanukas Chomas Yerushalayim, with the walls of Yerushalayim, so now there's going to be a whole new consecration, and this is going to be for the walls of Yerushalayim. It's going to be Simcha, the Todos, Bashir. It's going to be with a celebration where they're going to give the Korban Toda. There's going to be song with cymbals and harps and instruments and singers gathering all throughout Yerushalayim, all throughout the different villages. And this is going to be something that is very, very powerful. Now, we have to understand, okay, so this, first of all, it took them 52 days. That would not have gotten to when they're actually making this big party. So what happened? So a beautiful idea is that we know that in the time of Mashiach, what is going to happen? We know that the Chomos of Yerushalayim are going to be come down, that Hashem is going to Hashem brings the binyan, the Beis HaMikdash. And the thing that we're going to be in charge of, however, are the gates. And so here too, we have this idea that there was some level of a wall that was put up, and that only took 52 days. But the additional part, that was just a basic rudimentary part. But it then could be, it was polished up, and it looked much better, and so that is why it took longer for them to do this consecration. Do they need to do the consecration is the important question, and there's really a machlokas. There's a machlokas as to what this really meant. Some say that no, you didn't really need to do it. It was more like in name only, because we have this idea that that as soon as something of the Beis HaMikdash becomes holy, then it's holy l'doros. It's holy forever, and we have the idea of what is it that is holy forever. Those things that it says lifnei Hashem. What are the three things that say lifnei Hashem? We have the azara, so we have the place of the Beis HaMikdash. We have the area around the Har HaBayis, or we have all of Yerushalayim. So those things really are holy forever. Others say that, and so anything after that, anything that needed to be consecrated after that, use this consecration formula. So with the Toda, and with the singing, and with the instruments, and so that it was kind of the prototype for what any time that would need to be holy. And other places in Eretz Yisrael, they don't retain that same level of holiness, so they would need to be able to be doing this to for holiness purposes. Others say that no, any time that even though there wasn't the entirety of this process, because we don't have a king and we don't have the Urim and Tumim, it doesn't matter. It is something that that just represents, this is the process of consecration, and it's beautiful, and they're consecrating it, and they're giving lahodos lahalal to Hashem. Now there are two different parts of lahodos lahalal to Hashem. There's one which is to give the korban toda, to give the korban, but then there's the other which is the pirsum anis, sanctifying it for the sake of publicizing it. And that has to happen. Those are the two elements that are important, so that the people feel the Kedusha within, and then it echoes and it reverberates to the Kedusha without, to the people who hear about it. And those two parts are mentioned all, that those are the key. We say it in Hallel. But here, to start off with, in order for that process to happen, very beautifully in Pasuk Lamed, it says, "V'yitaru hakohanim b'levim, v'yitaru es ha'am." This is the bottom line when it comes to chinuch, when it comes to purification, when it comes to anything. First, you have to purify yourself. First, the kohanim and the levim, they had to become purified themselves, and then they were able to be in the position to be matahar the people. And maybe that's really that's really what represents this whole process of kedusha, the whole process of sanctifying. Is saying that we're going to sanctify from within, and then that's going to lead to the sanctification from without. The gates, the walls. What's so special about a wall? So a wall really is the difference between the in and the out. So first you sanctify the wall. You say that everything on the inside is really good. Like we're holy. We want it to be holy. We have the right intentions. We have the right heart. And then what happens thereafter is that it then echoes out. And so it echoes for generations, and it echoes for the people that are listening, and it echoes, that's really what this whole process is all about. Now, the process was really beautiful, and there were some things that were just interesting about the process to make mention, if we were to take it a little bit on a deeper level. So first of all, there were two different groups. There was one group that went from the one side around, and the other group that went from the other side around, and they met in the middle. How telling is that when we want to sanctify something, that there's different ways to get there. There's some people that are the righties, right? They do things always to the right, and so they end up at the at the end point. And then there's some people that are the lefties, and they do things very differently. But the beautiful thing is that they also end up in the right place. And the simcha of it is to highlight that's exactly, that's us. We don't all do it exactly the same way, but we all get to the end. And if we could be besimcha in our process, that's something that's very special. And that's uplifting in and of itself, that it doesn't matter if you're going to the right or you're going to the left. Now, of course, within reason, because it's all set. But the idea is that Shivin Panim LaTorah, there are different ways that you can reach the Ribono Shel Olam, and you can reach Kedusha. There were the breads. There were some breads that were bigger than from the Lechem Toda. Some were matzah, some were bread. Again, highlighting that that when you give a toda, there's just not one. When you give thanks to Hashem, it's just not one. It's not one size fits all. There are a lot of different ones, but there were so many of them. Why? Because it wasn't just for them to be eating; it was also for them to be sharing. Because there is no kedusha that happens without sharing. There was also so many different instruments that were played, and the word simcha is mentioned so many times because you have to go into that simcha mentality. The shlina doesn't rest except when there is simcha. The shlina, you can't get ruach hakodesh if there's no simcha. You have to be in a mentally happy place. And what was done, this hadn't happened like it did in Mitzvahs David Shlomo Beno. This is reminiscent of a time from past. It wasn't just that this was something that is special. It was something that reminds them, it's an ancestral thing. It's a generational thing. It's, that as much as we deviate from the course, and the annals of history suggest that we've gone very far from where our ancestors were. At the end of the day, there is so much that connects us, and that we're doing the best here. They're doing the best that they can. That things are not the same as what happened during the time of David HaMelech. It's not possible for them to be the same, but rather they are doing what they can to bring the kedusha again. And so what ultimately happens is they circle the walls. They went from the one side, from the other side. They went with musical accompaniment, the kohanim, the levim. They ultimately gave the karbanos. They sanctified the wall, and they sang songs of praise to Hashem, and this